Welcome to the Hashimoto's Doctor podcast. You're now part of a growing community of people determined to take their health back through education and self-empowerment. But because of the healthcare system today, we don't have access to the types of healthcare that we want. So we have to do things differently. We've got to do things smarter, and we do that by becoming our own advocates. This podcast will give you the perspective and thoughts of one of the world's leading Hashimoto's doctors. So let's get started. Hi everyone, Dr. Shook here. I hope you're doing well today. In today's podcast, what we're going to talk about is we're going to stay with our theme of cortisol. And I want to talk to you guys about this connection between cortisol and your brain and the degeneration of the brain. Okay, this is actually a cycle, guys. They both, it all feeds into one another. So let me explain this to you. This is a self-perpetuating cycle. So the elevated levels of cortisol, okay, which is your stress hormone, can, and it's been shown in the literature, to accelerate and degenerate neurons or nerve cells in a part of the brain called the hippocampus, okay? The hippocampus is actually the part of the brain that helps to regulate the production of cortisol. Okay, so, and it does so, the way that the hippocampus controls cortisol is, well, first you just have to understand how cortisol is made. Okay, it's not that complicated. You have in the center of your brain, you have a structure called the hypothalamus. Okay, the hypothalamus makes hormones that stimulate the pituitary gland. So a gland that's in the front part of the brain. The pituitary gland makes hormones that stimulate the adrenal glands to make cortisol. When cortisol levels go up or down, the hypothalamus, that structure in the center of the brain, monitors those levels and adjusts its output of the hormones that stimulate the pituitary. And then the pituitary, it controls the pituitary and what the pituitary releases, controlling the output of the cortisol. So it's this loop. It's called a feedback loop. So it's the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis or feedback system. Okay. So one we'll call it a gland. Okay. The hypothalamus is really a neurological and endocrine pathway where these systems come together. Neurological, your nervous system, endocrine, your hormonal system come together. Okay. So the hypothalamus releases the hormones that stimulate the pituitary. The pituitary then releases hormones that stimulate the the adrenal glands, and the adrenal glands and their output of cortisol, for example, stimulate and influence that entire system. Okay, so that's a feedback loop. It's a feedback system. So the interesting thing is that with this feedback system, one of the things that will occur is that you have elevated cortisol for a prolonged period of time, it literally will cause degeneration and loss of nerve cells or neurons. It causes the loss of brain mass. So you lose the mass. And in particular, this influences a region of the brain called the hippocampus. Okay, the hippocampus actually regulates that entire hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, that entire feedback loop I just discussed with you. So elevated cortisol can cause part of the brain to degenerate that controls the system that regulates cortisol. So what happens is that you have cortisol elevated for a prolonged period of time, then the hippocampus can degenerate, causing you to lose the ability to produce cortisol and result in exhaustion and loss of coordination of this system. It's not good, guys, because the hippocampus is also responsible for short-term memory loss. And it's one of the first areas that we see degenerate and go away when someone's developing Alzheimer's. So it's really important that you understand this feedback loop and mechanism, because when we see issues with cortisol, we always have to figure out what is driving the body to produce excessive cortisol. It's a huge, huge problem. So you've always got to look at the drivers of the cortisol. It's usually some form of stress. And when we're talking about stress, we're really looking at, the chemical, physical, and emotional. So Emotional stress is obvious, right? Anything that would put you under emotional distress, that would stimulate a fight or flight mechanism, which changes your hormones, causes you to produce cortisol. Pain, the physical stress would be physical pain. Pain will absolutely stimulate and produce a stress response. It will create a stress response in the body, and you'll produce excessive cortisol. And then chemical stress is probably one of the most common that we see that you're not able to determine. And that is, at least as an individual, you have to have someone help you investigate this further. So usually we see food sensitivities, which are driving an inflammatory response. We see infections, which are driving an inflammatory response, and then we see environmental chemicals, which are driving an inflammatory response. So this entire all these things can drive the cortisol. The cortisol can degenerate the brain, causing the brain to not be able to regulate the system that produces cortisol, resulting in fatigue and an inability to produce cortisol. So we literally have to work on finding out what's driving and causing the overproduction of cortisol, and at the same time we have to work on supporting the hippocampus and seeing if we can't help with regeneration of some of those cells, which we can work on doing that. And that's part of the entire approach is really focused on improving both of those things, improving the regulation of the cortisol producing system, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal system, and on dampening what you've got to address the cause, guys. You've got to get to the cause. You've got to get to the root of the problem. And that's really trying to figure out what's driving the inflammation, or what's driving the process that's causing you to produce cortisol, at least at a high rate. So, guys, I hope this has helped you out today. I really want to share this information with you because it's such a critical piece of the puzzle. Everything in the body's connected, and it's something I'm going to keep teaching you. If you guys will keep learning, guys, please help us share this message. So many people don't know this, and you heard me mention the word Alzheimer's in this talk. It is incredibly important that you guys understand that we are faced with an epidemic where in the near future they're predicting that the rates of Alzheimer's will be 1 in 3 people. I think it's by 2050. At the current rate, they believe that the rate of Alzheimer's will be 1 in 3 people. Unbelievable. We are reaching, and it's not just that, it's autoimmunity and all these other things are connected to a lot of these pathways in this physiology. We've got to understand and learn how to get ourselves as healthy as possible. We've got to address the toxins in our environment, and we can do that together, but it's going to take a group effort. I can only teach. You guys help me spread the word. Help us teach other people so that we can become better educated and become our own advocates and take our health back so that we can work better and more efficiently with our healthcare providers. So guys, I appreciate you so much. If you need help, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Remember, I do distance consulting. If you need help, we only work with about 1 or 2 people, though, new people per week maximum. And so reach out to us if you need help. But guys, I appreciate you so much. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you for hanging out with me today, and I look forward to talking to you guys again soon. Thanks. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed hanging out behind the scenes with Dr. Shook. You can also talk with and learn from Dr. Shook through Facebook Live on our Facebook page at the Office of Dr. Brad Shook. Don't forget, you can also get access to our videos, guidebooks, and thyroid programs at www.drbradshook.com. Oh yeah, and don't forget one more thing. We can change the world one person, one family, and one community at a time. Until next time, remember, today is your day, and no one will tell you who you are and what you can be.